All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to uh, the Sunday live stream, which is on Saturday this weekend. As I had a prior engagement on Sunday, um, but we are just continuing to go through and continue some polish on this guy. Well, I guess not polish. We're kind of in phase 2 of 3 here, and I'm hoping today to just wrap up the end of this phase, which is our sculpt refinement phase. Basically, we want to get our remaining parts, which is these claws. We want to get them up to the um, the level of detail that we have elsewhere in the sculpt. So yeah, let's just get right on in there and do it. I'm also keeping an eye out for areas that seem like they still have some of the warp and wobble from our first sculpt pass. So I'm um, looking for areas that should have a certain flow to them and are kind of lacking that. Like this area here, I feel like could be smoothed out a little bit. And like I said, the fact that we're working on an organic material gives us a lot of flexibility, about how we want this flow to go, but we still want to make sure it looks intentional. So go back to Alpha 48 here. Just want to clean up a couple of these areas first. Give them kind of a bit more of an even width. And I should pull up my references as well. Grab those. I think y'all are pretty familiar with kind of things I'm looking at over here. So I'm probably just going to keep this on my other monitor today. But I'll kind of pull it in if I'm referencing something specific. So I'm just going to move this over here. That'll give me a bit more screen space to work with. All right. So let's keep going here. Just going to kind of continue to find these shapes a little bit. Crease areas that could use a crease. Yeah, there's something about, I feel like this shape underneath is supposed to be kind of convex, and right now it's kind of looking a little bit, it's kind of like indented here, so I think we want to shift that a little bit. Welcome. Are you going to texture? Not today, but eventually, yes. We're going to do a full UV map. We're going to do a full low poly and then UV map for this guy. So we're kind of taking it beyond sort of the sculptural texturing that we might do in Zbrush. We're going to give it actual texture maps using Substance Painter. Once we have our UVs set up. For now, we kind of have a very basic, kind of a basic color pass on this, though it looks like I lost it for our, yeah, forgot to transfer the vertex paint onto our new model, but this is what it looked like before. But I'm not really concerned about that. It was just kind of a quick experiment to see, what our colors might look like here, but Now this is almost approaching, the kind of thing that maybe would have been better to split out as an extra subtool like I did on the right side, but I think it'll be fine. Just want to give it some, I'm using my, I have to select the smooth directional, which I keep reminding myself I should just set as default, because, as I've said before, very rarely find a situation where the regular smooth brush is going to be doing something for me that the smooth directional doesn't. And the smooth directional has so many more advantages. All right. That's pretty good. Again, this is a good thing to get down in this stage of things, this kind of refinement of overall forms, because it's going to be a lot harder to do that and preserve details if we go into detailing too soon. So I'm just making sure we have some of our overall forms looking good. One of the interesting things I was thinking about in terms of this design and in terms of crabs and crustaceans and stuff, is I was thinking about this video I saw where they were basically discussing the the realism of armor in films and movies and stuff, and how they often will make something that looks really cool but functionally wouldn't necessarily hold up. And they were talking specifically about with female characters how they have these this body armor that really fits the contour of their body and looks really cool, but in terms of its function, would just basically crumple on impact. And that's because, to make a very strong piece of armor, you look at like a traditional breastplate, which is just this very simple convex shape. It's basically it's kind of a sphere, because that is the best way to absorb and distribute impact throughout the whole piece. And so I was thinking about that as I was going through this, and that you kind of see that same logic applied to crustaceans, which is pretty cool, especially a guy like this, if you think about, or a turtle shell or something, It's not completely smooth, there are little kind of divots here and there, but overall the shape is this very smooth, convex shape. So I'm trying to bring that into these pieces, and even something like this where there's kind of a more of a flat end here. I may just want to nudge that out a little bit, and the viewer is not going to be thinking, oh, that looks like it can absorb impact better, but subconsciously, we are going to see that and recognize that we see that same pattern in insects and crustaceans and armored things, and it's going to make it feel more grounded and more real. So I'm trying to find opportunities to take these plates and give them a little bit more of kind of a smooth, convex shape to them. Especially right here, this looks like it kind of dips in, and I don't really want that. I want to have it really kind of come out. So, we're creating the illusion that it's sliding underneath, but we want to make sure that it looks like it's underneath there. It has this kind of concave form to it, or convex rather. And again, you know, this is something we could have approached a little bit differently if we broke these all out into different subtools, but I don't know. I just try to keep things as simple as possible. And since, you know, these aren't going to be moving independently when we animate, I think there's really much of a point to doing all that. Yeah, a lot of these gaps just need a bit of refinement here. In fact, I'm going to go to even higher subdivision, or lower, that is. I'm just going to... And then go down, and then we can crease. A little bit better. And over here, just looks like we could... Just kind of smoothing that out a little bit. Again, there can be maybe little variations, but overall, I feel like in the center here, we would want some kind of something like this. It's a little bit more complex than you might see on a smaller crustacean, because we have this increase of scale. All right, so I think I've taken care of most of the areas that I wanted to. Oh yeah, and then the other thing that I wanted to get to was this piece. If we look back at the concept, I kind of addressed this before, but I didn't address it enough. If you look at the concept, we have some very clear clear size differences between these elbow plates. And that's going to help our design, but also keep that on top. But also, if you think about when we move, this elbow joint is going to be stretching quite a lot. And if we have a big plate there, it's going to look kind of strange if that plate is, you know, deforming with the arm movement. Now that's acceptable and expected to a certain degree, you know, in games, or maybe to a lesser degree in film. You know, in film we expect a little bit more precision and, you know, realism. By the way, if anyone knows a reliable way to get rid of fruit flies, please let me know. I've been waging this war against them in my apartment for the past couple of weeks, and I've been keeping everything extremely clean, washing all of my dishes after I'm done with them, not leaving any food out. There's no fruit. And I don't know where they're coming from, but they just, and I have these traps everywhere. I have the apple cider vinegar with the dish soap. And I don't know. And they like to try to suck out your eye juice, so they're constantly hovering around your eyes, and it absolutely drives me insane. At least I think that's what they're doing. They're just looking for moisture, and they're constantly hovering around your eyes and mouth. Anyway, let me know if you have any suggestions. But all right, we got a question here. How do you commit to this work? Like when I sculpt a model, it looked okay, and I don't want to work on. Sorry. When I sculpt a model, if it looked okay, then I just won't work on it further. When will you know if it's perfect? Well, it will never be perfect. Yeah, you have to decide when it's good enough. And you know, it's a good question, but I think it's kind of down to you know, you kind of have to develop a sensibility for it. There's never going to be any kind of quantitative value to say like, okay, this is it. What I try to do, which is maybe doesn't directly answer the question, but it's a strategy that helps with that decision-making process, is I do what I'm doing now is I move through in multiple phases. So, for example, I'm kind of restraining myself from putting in too much detail in certain areas because I want to save that for kind of my third pass, basically. So I want to go through and work everything up evenly. So, you know, right now there's obviously a lot less detail and development in the claw area. So that's what we're gonna, you know, try to tackle today. But so I want to go through and get those up to the same level of detail before I consider, you know, further refinements, adding in more detail and textures and that kind of thing. So you can break it into as many of those steps as you want. I basically did a block out pass, and then this is my refinement pass, and then I'm doing a detailing pass. So you can at each of those phases, you can ask yourself, you know, is this enough? And it kind of depends upon what you want your end product to be and what scale it's being viewed at. Like, for example, if I was making this for a, let's say this was for like a top-down strategy game, and he's appearing on screen at this scale, you know, something like that. Already I've gone too far, right? Already I've probably put in way more detail than we need for that particular asset. Now, if you are building this for a first-person game, and you fully expect your player camera, if you're fighting this guy or something, or if you have cinematic cutscenes or something, especially where you're getting close-up of these faces, you're going to want a lot more textural detail than this. So that's what we would be focusing on in Pass 3, is bringing a lot of this up. And, I mean, people go really really crazy with it these days because our games and films and VFX can handle a lot more of that detail. So, you know, they'll have a close-up shot where you can see every pore and hair and fiber on this guy. And, you know, that's not, it's kind of a much more intensive workflow, and it's not like that level of detail is not one that I'm familiar with so much, or even really feel is necessary to go to in most cases. But it really depends upon what the purpose of your end product is. If you're just trying to create a cool sculpt and throw it on your portfolio, say, hey, look, I can sculpt this in ZBrush, and maybe you know your end result is going to be a 360 turnaround from about this this distance, then again, you know, this level of detail might be sufficient, again, once we get done with Pass 2. But say we finish Pass 3, and we're like, well, you know, I think this is going to be the kind of situation where we want to get up really close, so then we might do a Pass 4, where we go in and create, you know, tiny surface details with noise and tiny fibers and stuff. But I mean, usually that kind of stuff is mostly covered in the detail pass. So so yeah, it really depends. And hopefully a lot of your problem solving is decided at the concept level. So another way you can gauge when you're done is if you look at the concept and you say, yes, I've rendered everything to the degree that is present in the concept. And maybe the concept doesn't go into quite as much detail, or maybe it goes into more detail. So that's always a good metric. If you look at your concept and you think and you see areas that haven't been developed, then you keep developing them. Which is another reason why it's really useful to, I would say, almost essential to be working from a concept. Or if you were doing it yourself, to finish that concept phase prior to getting into sculpting, because that's, again, it's another way that you can help to guide your gauge of when something is done enough, basically, is whether or not it lines up with the concept. All right, so just returning back to these elbows here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert, and let's see if we can do this. Set it to the center. I guess we're working on this side. And reset rotation. Let's try. It's not working really, but just like, I have symmetry on. Yes. But I want to keep symmetry on, so I think we're just gonna have to, I think there's a way around this, but I forgot what it was, so I'm just gonna do this. Oops. Okay, symmetry's on. I'm sure there was a much better way to do this. There's always a better way to do something in ZBrush or 3D, but doesn't mean I'm always going to remember what that is. And usually doesn't necessarily matter too much, as long as the end result is more the same. Yeah, it might take a few extra minutes to do something the wrong way. That matters more if you're really on a tight production schedule, which in this case I'm not. But it's good to practice as if you are, if you're trying to get a job in this kind of thing, which not everybody is. So if not, just go at your own pace, go with the method that feels best to you. It feels like it doesn't completely stop your project in its tracks, so you have to go figure out how to do it. Sometimes there will be something I come across where I'm like, man, I know there's a better way to do this, and I've done it before, and I just can't remember exactly what that is. But it's not really worth it to me to kind of stop the momentum to go research that and come back. I just kind of want to do the version that I can remember at this time, find a workaround, and then if that doesn't work, maybe then I'll take a break and go do some research. But I generally try to keep the process pretty simple and organic, kind of more like a traditional sculpt. So there are not too many of those processes that I have to be remembering all the time. Helps to kind of keep my focus on the sculpt itself. So you move this down. I'm almost tempted to go even further down here, but kind of depends. We have to figure out where the joint is and decide, do we want to weight this further on the upper arm, or I think we'll just thinking about where the elbow is. I think think we'll just leave it here. I don't think it matters too much. That's close enough to our concept. Now let's look at the other side. We may have screwed up some things over here. No, it looks okay. All right, we've resized our elbow. I'm just gonna nudge it a little bit like that. Now let's turn off symmetry and let's get into our claws here. I've postponed them long enough, so actually now I remember what I was gonna do here was try to Z-remesh this this part that I cut off. But maybe we can sculpt around it. Let's see. Let's just try that before we spend time doing a Z-remesh. Am I streaming on any other platform? Nope, just YouTube right now. I never did... I've done Twitch streams before, but I never really built an account over there. Not really sure if they do too many art things over there on Twitch. I think they do sometimes. You know, I've done art streams for the company I work for over there, but for my personal stuff, this is really the only social media I have anymore. It's this YouTube channel and LinkedIn. That's pretty much it. All right, let's look at this here. So in our concept, we basically cut off this extra finger here so we could have some difference between the left and the right side. I know this topology is gonna bite me. So, all right, let's do a Z-remesh. And then we'll get into this. All right, I'm gonna duplicate. We went through these steps in some of the previous streams, so I'm not gonna break it down too much. I'm just going to show these two tools, and then let's take this one and let's do Z-remesh. Still have the same settings from the last one, so let's just do that. Error, remeshing, error, encountered, remeshing, aborted. Probably means that we are some issues with our geometry. So let's actually just delete the lower subdivisions and let's go to our geometry. Let's go to mesh integrity and check mesh integrity. 8 faces. Okay, let's just fix it. And now we should be able to subdivide. Let's try again, or Z-remesh. There we go. That's working well. That's something that hung me up a lot when I was first starting sculpting. I kept trying to Z-remesh and there would be issues like that. Definitely good to know that check mesh integrity option in there. It's really useful. I could have also done a remesh or a dynamesh first and then done the Z-remesher, and that probably would have done the trick. But you can't do either of those without deleting the lower subdivisions first, or at least, yeah, I think that's the only way. So it's going to take a while for this probably because we're working with 18 million polygons, and hopefully it's not crashing. There we go. A student, I've been working on a sculpt. It's a work in progress, but I've also uploaded it to ArtStation. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, just let me know your name on ArtStation. I'll go, I'll check it out sometime. You can, I'm on there too. I guess that's kind of a social media. I'm on ArtStation as well, so you can find me on there. I'm sure there's a link somewhere, or just search Evan Schumacher on there. Yeah, glad you're getting into this stuff. It's pretty fun. Okay, I'm actually gonna go a little bit higher with this Z remesh because um, uh, most of our main forms are pretty well dialed in, so I'm not quite as concerned about moving things in a lower subdivision level. So I'm gonna go a little higher, and that's gonna help us preserve a little bit more of our detail when we reproject. But it'll just take a second here. Yeah, I took some ZBrush courses recently, or I took two let's see, I took a few classes at Noman last summer, which I recommend. Those are really great. And their campus in North Hollywood. And oh cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. Um and I also took a creature sculpting in ZBrush course after that through Brainstorm with one of the same instructors. That was really fun as well. And that was more not focused on sculpting for games, but it was more focused on sculpting for concept, which is a bit of a different workflow, as I've mentioned. But I also took at Noman, I took a course on character creation for games. Learned a lot through that. That was very intense. I probably spent the most time per week on that one. You know, it's very rigorous. Okay, so we have this. We have our original, and let's just. I'm gonna hit F so we can, or Shift F so we can see our polys, and let's just divide, project all, divide, project all. Divide, project all. I can't remember how many subdivisions we had before. Let's see. That's 4. This has 5, but let's see if 4 is enough. Um, Probably, yes. But I'm just gonna do one more. Can't hurt. It's just gonna take a minute. Subdivide again and project all. This might take 30 seconds or so. So yeah, someone was asking last stream about how often you can do a Z remesh, and there's not really any particular limit. The only risk is that you might lose some detail if for some reason you, for example, if you start with, if you Z remesh too low, then your lowest subdivision may not line up well with the surface that you're trying to project from. And so you might get artifacts when you try to project onto that lower subdivision level. But as long as you have your Z remesh poly count dialed in well, and you check your project and everything looks good, there's not really, you can do that as many times as you want. It does get more costly in terms of time as you move down the levels of detail, because as we can see, once I go down to subdivision 5, that project takes quite a bit of time. So if we're trying to reproject tiny micro surface details on, you know, subdivision level 6 or 7, that could take minutes, or yeah, probably not hours, but you know, for each projection. So it's just, you know, that one took about a minute 30 seconds, so we're not going to go any lower than that. And just because I like to be tidy, I'm just gonna name body backup 2. We don't really, we have backups on our Z tools. This is just, I don't know. I like to keep a couple layers of backups for everything. So now, you know, we have all of that smoothness that we have. And if we cycle between these, there's no visible difference. Let's even look up close. Very little visible difference. In fact, this one is a little bit higher resolution because we started with a slightly higher lowest subdivision level. And now when we look at this, it looks kind of messed up here, but we should, in fact, I should have checked this earlier, actually. I actually should have checked this when I did the Z-remesh, because this is not the greatest edge flow, but I think it's going to be good enough. Hopefully. Ugh. I kind of screwed that up, didn't I? Do I want to go through all that again? Not really. I think let's just try to sculpt through it. And if it looks really weird, we'll Z-remesh again. But yeah, I should have checked that when we started, since that was the whole point of doing the Z-remesh, but whatever. All right, let's just keep on sculpting here. And I don't know, I hope it's apparent what I mean by bad edge flow here. You see how everything here is just following this nice even grid, moving, you know, it has these lines moving laterally and lines moving vertically. That's nice, but because we removed this part, it's, you know, kind of messed up that edge flow. So, you know, we have these all coming down to a single vertex here, and then it splits. So it's not very nice. We try to keep those areas away from larger smooth areas like we have here, but sometimes, you know, like this isn't actual retopology. You know, this is just for our sculpting. It's just when we have this smooth edge flow, it's going to be much easier to sculpt on top of, whereas this, if we try to smooth it especially, is going to create problems for us. But you know, we'll see if it actually causes too many issues. But anyway, I'm just going to go around and give this kind of the same treatment I've been giving everywhere else. And because we split symmetry, you know, we're going to have to do this twice, which I'm okay with, but it's just something to consider about, like I talked about last time. Whenever you take an area out of symmetry, you are doubling the amount of time that you're working on that area. So it's something to be conscious of, and making a conscious choice of when you take an area out of symmetry, because if you do it too soon, you're going to end up doubling a lot more work. But if you do it too late, then you're not going to have quite as much flexibility in that asymmetry. You're not going to have, I mean, it's pretty easy to rework a side, you know, that is, it's pretty easy to work symmetry into asymmetry. I guess it's probably easier to do that than it is to work asymmetry back into symmetry, which is basically impossible unless you do a mirror and weld, which then just removes all the stuff that you created in your asymmetry. So probably better to err on the side of doing more detail before you break symmetry. But in this case, I knew that, you know, I really wanted these two claws to be different. So, you know, I thought it was worth splitting them sooner. Sooner than later. So I definitely, I want to keep some areas of rest here. Oh my god, these camera controls. I'm gonna bring this guy down so we can see. There is kind of a divot here that I have in my concept that I don't have in my sculpts, but it's not that important to me. There is, I do like how it kind of comes up on the inside of the elbow a little bit more. Kind of like closes off that vulnerable space. So I'm gonna shift this a little bit. And for the sake of symmetry, I'm going to basically assume that all of these plates are going to be symmetrical, but everything below them, including this kind of skin area, we're going to break the symmetry there. So just keeping that in mind as I go through. I'm not going to work on these plates at all while I'm not in symmetry mode. So it's also like this is another case where, you know, your production timeline or your personal timeline, if you have one of those, if you do want to get into, you know, 3D for production, starting to set personal timeline goals is really not a bad idea. But depending upon that timeline, you have to evaluate whether it's worth it to create, to take that extra time to make something asymmetrical. You know, we could have sculpted this whole thing symmetrically and gotten it done far sooner. Maybe not far sooner, but, you know, say maybe 15% sooner. And especially when it comes to UVs and retopology, having symmetry can really make a difference. You know, you can basically have the amount of work that you're doing on something, but it diminishes the quality of the product. Having perfect symmetry in your model, it does not look good. It looks very suspicious. You know, it's especially on something that is not, yeah, maybe on like a machine that is like designed by, it looks like it's supposed to have been designed by humans to be symmetrical, but even so, like just as a general design principle, having even something that looks like it's supposed to have been designed symmetrically, is generally going to look better if there are some asymmetrical elements. So what we could have done if we were really short on time is I'm going to turn on these other things, actually. There we go. Just so we have some, don't lose that context. What we could have done is we could have done the whole body symmetrically and then maybe, yeah, added in the shell on the right side, on the shoulder, and then maybe added in separate claw piece or something, or just basically did the whole thing symmetrically, and then at the very end we would do one of the claws different. And maybe that would have been enough, but in my designs I like to incorporate some asymmetry at a lot of different levels in the process, you know, in terms of like where the spikes are placed and all that kind of stuff. And I think every little bit you can add there helps to reinforce the believability of the product. So here, it's getting into like a little bit, I don't want to go too crazy with this, but just a little bit of rough detailing here. Let's get some of the major forms. Want this to look like it's able to shift and move. And it's also bulking out far too much here, and this is left over from our major sculptural changes, so I'm just going to go to the lowest subdivision because that's where we want to be when we're making our larger form changes. I'm just going to kind of smooth this out a little bit too, but mainly pull it in so it's not, you know, bunching up so much on the inside of the elbow. Let's see how that looks. It's good. In fact, I probably should have had symmetry on for this part, but it's fine. It'll take a little extra time, but it's just going to improve the quality of the product. Okay, I'm going to turn it on here, just because I'm working right around these plates. Make sure that line is nice and crisp. So with that Z-remesh, we're also releasing tension in some of these areas that were stretched before. Now we can sculpt a little bit deeper into some of these crevices without stretching our geometry too much. Hopefully. Here it's getting a little stretched, but let's do the interior of the... Actually, I'm just going to hit this with a little bit of an inflate. Let's just go down to deformation. Just to bump that up a little bit. There we go. It's another way of, probably a faster way of doing what I was doing before, which was masking these out and then hitting them with the inflate brush manually. But here I'm just doing it with the mask and then the inflate deformation tool. I'm actually going to be going to Maine soon. We'll likely be eating some lobster there. So I'll be sure to do some research while I'm there to examine more of the intricacies of the shell design up close. All right, probably getting into a little bit too much detail here, but I want to make sure these forms are working well for us. So I'm gonna just check, make sure this is working on the other side. Looks like it generally is. So I'm gonna break symmetry, go back to this, focus on the larger forms. I do really want to have a strong indent here, so I'm just gonna go in with a very large dam standard. In fact, we should have been doing this earlier, but I really want to focus on this particular area right now. So I'm just gonna let's do W, Control W, and Control Shift click to isolate this. So we can focus a little bit and not have all those other pieces in front. I'm going to hide these other tools as well. All right, that's better. Not sure about this little divot. Maybe we want to have this as more of a concave, keep getting this mixed up. Convex shape. Kind of smooth out the top there. And then kind of one big area of rest right here. And with the smooth directional, if I want to have it behave just like a normal smooth brush, I just kind of smooth in little circles. And that really seems to do the trick. Just going to turn on double so you don't see all those floating little particles there. And I'm kind of breaking up this edge too. You know, we don't want it to look like it's all one big smooth thing. Want some bumps and stuff like that. All right, moving down to the claw here. I'm going to take a closer look at some of our... So this guy doesn't actually really have a much of a pincher yet. We haven't really designed him to have that function, but I don't see why we couldn't. Maybe his left hand is kind of his pinching hand, and his right hand is, I don't know, for bashing or digging or something. I'm gonna get a nice detail of one of these claws, but I don't really have one. I keep forgetting to get more refs, but I'm not gonna spend our time doing that. So let's look at this one. It's got a lot of the major elements there. So probably, you know, if this is going to be remotely functional as a pinching tool, we should probably expand this part of it. So we are deviating from concept a little bit. And this is probably something that I should have anticipated at the concept phase, which is asking myself, what are these claws really doing? And as it stands, they can't really do anything. They can kind of, you know, basically just poke and maybe dig, but, you know, if this is a joint, it's basically a useless joint. I mean, there's nothing you can grip between these two spots, so I'm going to kind of correct that. I mean, not that it's wrong necessarily, it's just, you know, it's just kind of a, it needs some kind of justification, I think, if it's not going to be functional. And that could be part of our backstory, you know, like, if this isn't actually, if this is kind of more of a mutant, and not like a organically designed creature, you know, like an actual crab or lobster, then yeah, maybe it would make more sense for it to have parts that are not really functioning, or even like vestigial or something like that. And you know, there are vestigial elements in real animals. So it's not, I don't know, it's not inconceivable that he would have kind of, but I think I would like to, and again, it helps to differentiate between left and right arms here too. If we have one that's kind of more functional and one that's a little bit, you know, he has one for grabbing and one for bashing. I think it's how I'd like to think of it. So I kind of like that idea. And it doesn't have to be the best at grabbing, but I think it should be able to do something. So I'm just going to keep extending it out. Look back at my my reference here. See, this is a very efficiently designed grabber, and I don't think ours has to be quite that level. But I'm just increasing the curve a little bit so it looks like, you know, it's at least designed to have this kind of pinch. And I think it's probably good enough in terms of our overall silhouette. So I'm going to drop down to some lower subdivisions. I see these like inner sheaths kind of at some of these junctures too. So maybe that's something that we can, you know, like that's maybe something I would expect to see right here. It's just something like that. That's maybe a slightly different color. I don't really know exactly what it is or what its function is, but you know, if it's in our reference, it can't really hurt to include it. So just gonna throw it in there. It's gonna be maybe a different material than our other, and hopefully I don't forget about it, but you know, at least if it's in the sculpt, you know, it's there. All right, so coming back to here, let's kind of blow this out a little bit. Let's define this. Define this edge a little bit better. I want to have a little bit of wiggle room around the forward and backward motion here, but we don't need quite as much on the sides. You know, so I'm leaving a bit of a gap on this end. And same on the other end. Maybe I'll carve in a little bit more so we have a little bit more wiggle room there. Literal wiggle room. And look at this area. See how it's kind of flat and kind of deflated? We should fix that. And the matte cap pearl cavity is really good for detecting some of these areas that maybe you would miss in a different material, which is why I'm using it. Again, as with the body plates and all that kind of stuff, if this is a mechanical appendage, you know, and it's going to go through a lot of wear and a lot of force, we want to make sure that it looks like it can withstand that force. So again, having a shell that looks like it's durable and can withstand some impact, it's gonna really help. And if we want to make something that looks like it can handle some impact, again, we're using some of those concave convex forms. And if we have some little creases in between them, that's fine. It seems to be an acceptable acceptable design as far as nature is concerned. But we definitely want to avoid areas that were like indented like this. So we want our, again, to look like it's kind of being inflated from the inside out. You know, I'm going to hit this with a much larger damn standard to try to get more of a large crease here. Okay. We have this spike already kind of built in. We'll probably make a few more of these, but for now I'm just gonna keep that one there. Just make a very clear indent. Along the edge. I'm keeping a little bit of a gap there. Because this is a moving part, I don't want it to ever look like it's going to be rubbing up against anything, you know? And then we can even have this little sheath element that I'm seeing in our reference. All right. And let's just refine this edge. All right, now we can probably, we're not really doing this yet in other areas, but I think because this is kind of a special part, I think we can do some of these little knobbly bits, for lack of a better term. So let's do some hard mask, make some variants. To go down oh, we don't have any more subdivisions, so I'm just gonna let's do a move. Let's see how this works. Move, smooth. Let's make some of them a little bit bigger than others. I'll just hit them again. That's good enough for now. Just gonna kind of go around and sculpt around them a little bit. We're gonna hit this with a Z-Remesh one more time before we go into final detailing, so not concerned about all those little artifacts there. Maybe we want a bit more of a point at the end. There we go. It's pretty good. And then for our larger, uh-oh, my PRF is frozen. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. I do like having this little kind of like one sort of medium-sized tooth in here, so I'm going to pull that out. We'll do something similar over here. I don't know. Like that. Oh, that's kind of cool. All right, keep that. Well, maybe just do it a little bit different. No, I do like that. Okay, now let's kind of do the same thing over here. Actually, I want to just refine this a little bit first. Smooth it out. So far, this area isn't causing us too much grief. In fact, if I kind of just sculpt over it a little bit, you know, I think perhaps it won't bother us too much. And then maybe when we do the final Z remesh, you know, we'll be able to completely work that out. But we'll make sure to check this time. To check this time to see if our edge flow is good before we... Yeah, you see, we're never really going to get rid of this. As long as that edge flow is the way it is, we're not going to get rid of this little artifact here. So I'm just going to keep the sculpt rough and hope that when we do our final Z remesh, it picks up that area and smooths it out. We'll just keep it pretty rough for now, and we're not going to hit it with the smooth, because if we hit it with the smooth, it's just going to revert. So I'm going to keep the sculpt pretty rough and resist the temptation to go in and smooth it in that area. All right, so back to this. Let's go back in. And let's create some of these. I don't know, I'm leaning so far over here. Why am I doing that? Oh. Make sure I stand up straight. It's very easy to lose sight of what your body's doing when you get deep in this sculpting state, but that can get kind of dangerous. Just kind of integrating this piece by creating some similar things going on around it at different scales. It's a good way to have kind of take an element and blend it in a little bit. So something like that. Probably want to do that in some other areas around here, but let me finish this claw first. And trying to do the best we have with this edge flow here. All right, going down to lower subdivision, let's do our mask. Let's kind of spread them out a little bit more this time. All right. Let's hit them with the move and smooth. Move and smooth. All right. It's pretty good. A little too consistent. So I'm just going to take some of these ones down a little bit. Maybe increase this. And then, oh my God, it's crazy. Okay. That's, well, maybe that last one got a little bit too big, so let's dial that back. Maybe instead we can reduce this one a little bit. And now let's kind of sculpt around these to help them fit in. Cool. That's looking pretty good. All right. Let's smooth out some of these other areas. Be careful to avoid this. See if I smooth this, it gets all messed up again. So I'm just gonna keep that as it is. Smooth areas around it. You know what we could do, actually? I was talking earlier about sculpting with the topology instead of against it. You know, since our Z-remesh didn't take care of this, we could... Let's take a look at this. See how it's all converging here. Maybe we could get away with making a little something here. And that will hide the inconsistency. And that way, we don't have to worry about smoothing it because it's not supposed to be smooth. So if we go to our lowest subdivision here, and we start sculpting, it's not, you know, it's not quite as smooth as it would be if we were just pulling this from a, you know, an area with smoother topology, but it's better than if we tried to make it look smooth. See, it still kind of breaks up here, but I'm not really concerned about that because our overall form is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So yeah, probably could have thought of that earlier, but I was talking about last time about like this is kind of about the conversation between you and the medium. Um, if we were working with clay, we would have to work with a different set of restrictions. If we're working with paint, we work with another set of restrictions. And since we're working with polygons, which is basically the medium of 3D sculpting, sometimes we have to adapt to what the polygons are doing. And yes, we can try to impose our own will on them to whatever degree we can, but sometimes stuff like this can lead to happy accidents. So I'm going to pick a few more places to create some of these kind of lumpy things so that, and again, like, so this doesn't stand out, we can create some other areas that sort of resemble that so it doesn't, stick out so much. And we're probably going to do that for our overall sculpt at one point. This is a little bit more of what I would call the detailing phase, and there are alphas that could make this work a bit easier for us, but I'm just kind of doing a quick version of it here. Let's check the overall form here. It looks like these are almost kind of heading in different directions, so I'm just gonna nudge this a little bit. Maybe move these over. Okay. I think that's pretty good for our left claw. Obviously, there's more we could do, but for the sake of time, I think let's move on to the right one. Maybe I'll just push this down a little bit. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll shift to that side. So let's reveal this. Let's actually take a look in context, see if this is still working, and you know what? I think we kind of lost some of the dynamic of the big, medium, small here. So I think what I'm going to do is just bring this out a little bit. So these ends don't look quite so even. Let me check, make sure I didn't wobble this too much. So, I mean, this is definitely much more of an actual lobster claw than than our concept. And, you know, it really did change the silhouette. I kind of just went for it. I don't think it necessarily improved it, but I think it's okay. I wonder if we shifted this up like that. Well, it's a bit of a different vibe. I don't think it's bad necessarily. We may have to compensate for it a little bit. I'm not sure how exactly. I think what I'm seeing is in our concept, we kind of have this nice flow from thick to thin to thick to thin. And here we kind of have thick to thin to thick to thin, and then it goes thick again. So how could we... Maybe we can kind of do this and maybe bring in the... I mean, the claw is going to move, but... I think that's a little bit better. I think we're going to have to sculpt a little bit more to accommodate this. I don't know, I just feel like we lost some of our shape dynamics. You know what? Let's just come back to that. Because I'm just gonna take a quick break, and then we'll focus on the right side. Maybe we'll think of something that we can do with the other side first. So let's just turn on our other parts here. So you can see everything in context. Okay. I will be right back. All right, we are back. Let's keep it going here. All right, so moving to the right side. Let's fix this little nub. I'm not really sure what this is doing. I'm just going to smooth it out, and then let's just bring it out again. Yeah, so this overall form is feeling kind of wobbly still, so let's just go in and with our smooth directional, our lowest subdivision level, I'm just going to go up and down and smooth out some of those areas. Okay. We almost have kind of a palm here. So again, that's another way we can differentiate between the left and right side here, but let's go down a level, smooth a little more. Go down one more level, smooth again. So we just have kind of a nice smooth area to start with, and this little thing has gotten a little pinched, so I'm just going to inflate it. Smooth, inflate, smooth. All right, good enough. All right, let's hit this edge here. And I think to start, I like how this is actually going in our concept, so I don't think all of our edges have to kind of flare out like I've been doing. Some of them can just kind of gently go in like this, so let's do that. And I'm going to go ahead and isolate this too. So have that separated out. And just going to smooth out this area too. Got a little bit of wobble over here. Let's fix that. And again, not all wobble is bad wobble, but we at least want it to be intentional. All right. So let's hit this edge. Let's kind of save ourselves some time and just give this guy kind of a uniform inflate instead of, at least to start with, then we can refine it from there. here we can actually soften this first. Let's hit Control a couple times and invert. And then cancel, I don't know what that is. Almost hit delete all. Which reminds me, let's save. Save as Lobsterman 008. Okay. Now go to deformation. Let's inflate. Maybe a little too much. There we go. Just kind of smooth that out a little bit. And then let's go in and hit it with the damn standard again. You kind of reduce the crease here too, where it's pulling in. You know, because we don't want this to look mechanical. We don't want it to be necessarily like super even crease all around. And give this a little bit of the same treatment we did on the other side, where we just push in this some, but don't need to do quite as much because the side's a bit larger. All right, then we got all kinds of globby skin bits in that area, which is exactly what we want. Not crazy about this lip here. Not sure why. It looks like it's been compressed or something. I don't know. Need something to break it up. All right, let's keep working our way down. Kind of adding in a lot of those micro inflations. Yeah, I'm really not crazy about how this area is looking. I'm not sure why. It just needs more organic variation to it. It's all looking a little bit smooth and kind of unnatural. All right, let's keep moving down. I'm going to do the same thing on this side that I did over there and just add a little bit of context detail, I guess we could call this. And yeah, let's get down to this claw. Give it the same treatment as the other side. Of course, the size and function might be a little bit different, but a lot of the textural cues will be the same. In fact, we're going to do the same thing where we try to create a gap here with a bit of flexibility in between. There we go. In fact, if we were really going to animate this, which I don't think we will, down to these little claws, I would probably want to pull this out a little bit more. Um, but you know, let's not rule it out. So I'm just gonna give this a little bit more breathing room so we can get some of those details in underneath. It's just kind of a general good practice. And even if we do animate it, you know, it's not going to move that much. Um, considering this is his Bastion arm. All right, down here, if you recall, we were basically referencing the human palm in terms of how some of these shapes are fitting together. So I'm just going to kind of, if this is our thumb and over here is our pinky, I'm going to kind of allude to that a little bit. And um, let's do the same thing a little bit here. And just gonna pull this out ever so slightly, just in case we do want to move it around, or you know, we want to make sure we include some of that sculptural detail. Um, so let's just pull it out a tiny bit. You know, it's easier to compress it uh, compress the polygons during animation than it is to expand them. So we want to, if we're animating anything, we want to start it in the kind of expanded position, which is why we are keeping our character in more of a pose than the pose that we're the pose from our concept here, which is, I don't know, I guess still kind of an A pose, but it's really just more of a your kind of typical standing idle pose. I don't really want this to be a perfectly straight line here, so I'm just kind of mucking it up a little bit. I noticed too, I've spent very little time on the face so far, even though we're gonna spend quite a bit of time on that in the detailing phase. And that's because a lot of these, major form changes we've made just it would have been really hard to preserve um, detail on something that small scale while we are addressing, these larger sort of form changes. So it's always really tempting to go into the face and spend a lot of time on that right away. But really, we've spent more time on the claws and the rest of the body um, than we have on the face, uh, or at least equal time per body part. Um, and that's sort of a good workflow. It's the same as moving sort of low detail to high, but it's very easy to get sort of sucked into to detail on those kinds of things that are sort of high impact areas, if we're not conscious about it. So, you know, resist that temptation, or else you may end up having to um, redo a lot of that work, or you may end up just really limiting your ability to make larger changes. All right, let's see here. Just smoothing some of these bits out here. Maybe I'll pull this out a little bit more, but we don't want to go full claw here. Do the same here. Cool. So I think last thing we got to do here is I like this little, kind of have two parts forming the interior edge here, and I don't know, for some reason I'm liking how that is working, so I'm just gonna emphasize that a little bit more. So yeah, let's just add a few little kind of spiky bits here. So let's do our quick kind of strategy. We kind of have to decide what direction they're going in. I'm going to kind of find a point somewhere in the middle of the palm that they're kind of facing. They're not really facing towards one another, but they're sort of facing whatever the palm might be gripping or digging, unlike with the left side. So I don't know. We didn't really include that in the concept, so I'm kind of just, we're experimenting a little bit here. But let's try this. And we'll do on the other side, kind of facing inward. I'm doing the alt mouse mouse pull. And I guess these don't even necessarily have to be full-on spikes. They're just kind of for grip, you know, more than full-on pinching necessarily. So I'm just gonna hit some of these with the inflate so they don't look quite so pokey. And yeah, let's do the same thing here. Keep accidentally smoothing it. So let's invert. I like to be pretty subtle with this one. Right. Smooth it. All right. It's kind of interesting. Now let's just blend that in a little bit with some clay tool so they don't stick out quite as much. But I think this is interesting. Like, this is not, we're kind of going outside of conventional anatomy here. So we're kind of having to guess our way through it a little bit. And that's cool because the more we push outside of conventional anatomy, the more this becomes, you know, sort of more original, not completely original, but more original creative ideas versus just sort of copying our reference material. I mean, obviously, just like having a man-shaped lobster is, you know, a novel enough idea to warrant its execution, but you know, little things like this, I think, really help to bring that idea home, where it's not quite a lobster claw, it's not a crab claw, it's not a hand, it's just kind of somewhere in between. And I think this kind of sort of like mashup of, you know, organic forms and functions makes for a really compelling execution of the concept. I think maybe I can pull this out just a little bit. And we can have some knobs at the end here too. But we're getting pretty dang detailed here, so I'm going to put pause on this. I don't know. This is pretty weird. I'm just going to do a couple other spots. But yeah, we're going to go through the rest of the body and kind of, you know, bring in some more of these kind of micro elements. Right now they're sort of sticking out because we don't see them anywhere else, but all right. And, you know, I think the silhouette on that side is still holding up for the most part. I think we're going to need to break up this large space a little bit more. It's just kind of reading as a little bit incomplete. So maybe I'll just, I think I had this in the concept too, but I'm just going to break out a section here. Just a little bit of a crease between these parts. So that's like a little bit more development there, even though the overall silhouette is the same. I'm going to do the same thing right here. And then I'm going to have to stop because, oh, my poor wrist. It's getting old, along with the rest of me, but I had surgery on this wrist last year. I had a cyst forming along the wrist joint, which is likely a symptom of having been doing this kind of stuff for so long. Some people get it without that, but they went and did this surgery to remove, I don't know if this is too much information for you guys, but anyway, to address that, and because I couldn't bend my wrist or put any weight on it without pain. And they did the surgery, and I healed from the surgery. I was in a cast for a month or two, and it still hurts. The cyst is gone, but something about my ligaments and everything that was in there just has not really recovered, and it's so I'm not really sure. I don't know. I guess it's better than if I hadn't done it, but yeah, I guess I'm just wearing out this this wrist, so I may have to switch at some point. Just start learning how to go lefty here. Oh boy. Anyway, I think that's enough for today. I think we completed our goals, which I feel like we generally have been missing them with these sessions. Obviously, there's more refinements we can do, and I'll probably notice some things when we hop on next week that I want to tweak before we go into further detailing. But I think we're pretty much ready to go into our detailing phase. And make some cards. I know we talked about that last time, so we'll probably do that and start positioning those so we can understand, how things are going to look in that context. Yeah, maybe do a little bit of silhouette adjustment on this left one. I don't think it's sticking out as much as I thought. I think just this overall form still needs some development, kind of like I did here on the right side, but anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for today. Thank you for those of you who are tuning in or watching this later on. I passed 2,000 subscribers this week. So I know a lot of people have been watching these streams after, so I appreciate you guys, and also some of my other videos seem to have been picking up some steam lately, which is funny because they're not necessarily always the videos I would expect to catch on, but so it goes with the whims of the algorithm, or just what, I don't know, what people are interested in. A lot of people have been searching for concept art time lapses, which is funny because that was such a big thing several, I don't know, 10-ish years ago, I think, when that started really becoming a big thing. And it seems like people are still interested in that and get some value out of that. So I think that's really cool. I appreciate those of you who are continuing to watch, and continuing to, those of you who are popping in during these streams. I have been doing them every weekend, trying to get that going again. Usually on Sundays at 9 Pacific. This time I did it on Saturday, but of course, you can keep an eye out for the announcement on my YouTube channel when I post the stream. So, thank you guys, and enjoy your weekends and your week, and I'll catch you next time.